So excited it was the same music as earlier today and the other two. I'm sitting there doing my dance while we're getting started. Thank you all for for joining us again today. My name is Joe Lurie. It's a little bit later in the day from when I talked to you earlier, and I hope you've been really enjoying all the different AMAs we've had, from our earlier one on autopilot to endpoint analytics, iOS, Mac OS, and today we're going to be talking about device cloud-based device management with Cloud Attach. And I'm here today with my friends Steve Thomas and Danny Guillory, and I'd like you guys to introduce yourselves. Steve?
First of all, I only know one dance move. That's the only thing I know how to do.
Yeah, same.
Yep, Steve Thomas here. Little caveat here: this is a global event, and I'm actually dialing in from central Italy right now. If you can't tell, I'm in a hotel room. But let's keep our fingers crossed about my internet holding up here. And I'm here, of course, with the man of the hour himself, Mr. Guillory.
I don't know about man of the hour, but yeah, Danny Guillory, senior program manager, responsible, good or bad, for everything cloud attached.
We'll say good. Everything good about Cloud Attach. All the bad stuff Steve owns and you own.
Yeah.
So again, thanks all for joining us. This is the last of 4 AMAs. Even after this, even after we stop recording, we're going to continue looking at things like the chat. So make sure you just keep asking us questions because we're here to help you. And Steve, I see that you're in Central Italy. I could tell from your accents that you're actually from Central Italy, I'm guessing.
Sì, un poco.
All right. So thanks, everyone. And start asking your questions. We'll be happy to answer them. Danny, earlier today in the Autopilot AMA, you said SCCM a couple of times, and I charged you $1 for each one, but you threw $20 in the jar. So you've got about 11 more that you can say. If you want to use those today, in this session, you can do about 11 more.
That's great. That's great.
So for those that weren't in that earlier session, we were talking about autopilot into co-management, and I think that worked with this tenant attached session as well. When you do the autopilot into co-management, we talked about things like needing a CMG, and we talked about stuff like that. But I'm going to guess as well, one of the requirements is to enable that cloud attach. Is that correct?
Yeah. Whenever customers are on various points of their journey. I meet customers that are far down the line. I meet customers that are stuck in the middle. Some are in the middle and still moving. Some are really just starting to cross the line, which I find surprising with COVID. Like, my first question is, what did you do? The second question is, all right, let's get you started. The least disruptive, like I've said this a few times since last 2 Ignites. I know they've been virtual, but the enablement of co-management is zero risk. Like, you should definitely be out there enabling co-management and moving forward with your cloud journey. Don't get stuck. Bring us challenges and issues that you have. Be selfish. Work with your teams to figure out what you need to do to move the needle, move the bar, move forward in your progress. Try not to get stuck. Getting stuck winds up just bubbling up more issues. So cloud attaching, co-management is one of those. I guess I'll explain a little bit of what I mean by cloud attach, at least when I talk to customers. Cloud attach is an umbrella for co-management, tenant attach. Those are the two that I would consider falling under the cloud attach phrasing or wording. So when I ask customers if they're cloud attached, some of them will say yes, some of them will say no, and it's still a little bit confusing on what we mean by being cloud attached. We invented co-management first. So a lot of people are co-managed. We wanted to lower the bar of entry, so that's where your tenant attach came from, and it came second. So sometimes customers aren't really sure, depending on who you talk to in the organization, right? They'll know if they're cloud attached, using both or using one. We've done several surveys, on the socials, Twitter, Facebook, things like that. I try to be available via those channels to help displace any FUD and confusion, really just out of pure kindness in my heart, because you know what, I was a customer and I know what it's like fighting fires all day and not knowing stuff or not being in the circles. So I try to be available. So anybody that hits me up on Twitter or any of the socials, I can't promise it's the same day because I don't look at it every day, but I try to be available and open.
That's awesome. I talked to a lot of customers as well, and we enabled cloud attached, tenant attached, co-management. That's something that's been going on for a couple of years now. And with COVID, as you mentioned, customers that were purely on-premises managed, they had a tough time doing things like Windows updates and proving compliance and whatnot. And a lot of customers enabled a CMG or a cloud management gateway, but didn't go through with cloud attached, tenant attached. When you talk to a customer that has done a CMG but hasn't done tenant attached, what kind of advice do you give them? Do you tell them that they're good, you're good with the CMG, or do you say, okay, now take the next step and do the tenant attached?
If they have a CMG and they're not tenant attached, the obvious conversation for me is why. Like a lot of times they don't know about it. I will say a lot of conversations turn into politics. I don't know why. I don't know who to go talk to. I don't have permissions, things like that. To be fair, I'm not going to say I'm not interested in those conversations, but I don't have a way to help you with those internal politics conversations. If it's a tech workflow or risk type conversation, totally love having those conversations, because the thing that gets me excited about the whole cloud attached thing is the art of the possible, right? Being on the customer side for so long, and working my way through the ranks here at Microsoft, like I have a method to the madness on how I would do it with low risk. Probably would still have some of the same complaints that customers have today, but those are the things I will push on Microsoft for. Information is currency, I would say, right? Currency, because you need to make those decisions. So, Microsoft deserves to be transparent with you. I am always very transparent on what we're
very transparent.
Sometimes overly transparent, but you need those answers, right, to make decisions within your organization. So, if you don't have if you have a CMG today and you're not using tenant attached, I would ask why. And if those or if the whys turns out to be things that I can actually help you and give you guidance with, and helping and giving guidance is really giving the customer the power to ask themselves the right question. I want to empower the customers to be able to help make that decision themselves, not necessarily ask me what should I do. Like I want everybody cloud attached, but what does that mean for you and your business? What's the value? What you get lots of things and you may not see value in it first. There's a lot of customers I talk to like, yeah, I don't see value in that. But then 6 months later, like, man, you know what? I should have turned it on. Like, yep, I told you should turn it on. Yep. Turn it on now, even if you get little value, or turn it on now, because the things that we're going to deliver in it, continuously innovating in it, you're going to continue to just inherit that said value. And we're not going to break you. We're just going to start showing you more stuff that you can see about your infrastructure and make decisions on. So go through the cabs now. God forbid I just said cabs, because I remember those and they can be rough. But Steve, you're on the customer side too. I mean, I'll drink some water. You chime in.
I'll say this. I never have a discussion about the big three, any component of the big three, without an all-encompassing discussion of the big three. And using the CMG, the Cloud Management Gateway, as an example, if a customer comes to me and wants to have a discussion about the Cloud Management Gateway, I pivot it into a discussion around the big three, because when obviously they're probably wanting to manage and support remote workers. So when we're talking about the Cloud Management Gateway, I also remind them that you may not necessarily want to have everything going through the Cloud Management Gateway in terms of workload. It's also an opportunity to talk about things like co-management. For example, if are you really wanting to push Windows updates down through the Cloud Management Gateway when they have an opportunity to get it free by enabling co-management and shifting that workload for Windows Update or Office updates or anything that's servicing from Microsoft? You can switch those payloads and use our dime for that, instead of incurring any potential Cloud Management Gateway cost. So also the question that came in from LinkedIn, what's the difference between tenant attach and cloud attach? I get that a lot when I'm talking about, again, the big three. And I remind them, just as Danny said earlier, that cloud attach is kind of the umbrella term for the ways in which we can cloud enable our existing config manager state. And sometimes it takes a little bit of oversimplification, but I'll say, hey, for co-management, we're kind of establishing the relationship at the client level, whereas tenant attach, we're kind of establishing that relationship at the site level. I know that's kind of an oversimplification, but customers, the light bulb kind of goes off then.
No, it's spot on. So we say it exactly the same way, right? It's it helps the IT pro you're talking to talk to the people that they have to go get approval from, that will be worried, right? Like, and I'm just being honest. The security guy, right? He's like, whoa, when you turn it on, what are you doing? Like, well, co-management, the devices talk to the service. When it's tenant attached, use the relationship between the on-prem console and the cloud console. The devices don't even know anything's going on. So like, that's why tenant attaches that lower bar of entry, because my relationship is from the site server to the cloud console, not all my devices. So depending on your security and your team, you can have a different experience or different conversation and dialogue internally.
And I like with the cloud attached versus CMG conversation to talk about how the cloud attach enrolls you into endpoint analytics. And we talked about endpoint analytics in another AMA, and you get to take advantage of things like conditional access to access any resources. So I really like bringing those in as well. And Steve, you had mentioned earlier something about, do you really want to get your Windows updates from Microsoft or from your CMG? We can get them from Microsoft. And this kind of goes into Daniel's question. Is it possible that a co-managed device with the endpoint security slider is moved to Intune to get the policies from Config Manager or GPO if they are still targeted to that device via some collection group?
That's a good question. So I think I'm going to kind of throw Matt a bone here if he's in the back answering questions. But that question, I think the endpoint, when you move the slider over, Intune's the authority on that device. So if you've taken the slider from Configuration Manager to Intune, then endpoint security policies will come from the cloud. Matt can chime in the questions if he has some more he wants to add, but that slider is being moved over. So endpoint security is actually going to get its policies from the cloud, unless there's some other weird mechanism I don't know about, which Matt can chime in, but that's all that policy is coming from the cloud. So make sure that I guess what I don't want to avoid or allude here to is the gray area of the pilot collection, right? If you have that slider in the middle, now you have some other limiting factors you got to go look at in the funnel that there is, because pilot kind of puts this funnel over that slider to where the device needs to be in the collection, because you told that when you put in sliders, when you put in pilot, you have to select a collection. Mm-hmm. So then you actually put a few dependencies on there, like collection evaluator. Is the device in the collection? Did it get there? Yes, no. Then where's it getting policy and authorities from? So if you move the slider all the way to the right, you really don't have that funnel to deal with. But if you got that slider in the middle, then again, I don't want to avoid the area, but there's that gray area where you have to figure out, is the device in the collection? Is it getting the right workloads, et cetera, et cetera? So that's a little bit probably more than you wanted, but hopefully that gives you more info.
Regarding that security slider, the endpoint security, I had heard rumors, I suppose, that it's possible that like BitLocker is going to be, it's in there now, but it's actually going to move into its own sub slider. Did I hear that correctly earlier? And
validate with that with Matt, because he's owning that piece, but I think it is. I don't know. I can't answer definitively.
Okay.
Matt would got to answer that one.
All right, thanks. We have a question here from Mark. I have co-manager enabled, but don't see any config manager actions or information other than agent state. Do I need to enable tenant attach as well to get this information into endpoint manager? I assume that means endpoint manager admin center, Intune, or am I missing something?
So if you've enabled co-management, then that device, again, well, now we go back to the whole pilot collection or not pilot collection, right? So what did you select, right? And specifically for that device, if you picked pilot, you pick the collection. Is that device in the collection? If it is in the collection, then you'll see that record on-prem as well as in the cloud. In the cloud, it'll show managed by, it'll say co-manage. If you enable tenant attach and the device is just tenant attached only, not co-managed, which means the site server uploaded the record to the cloud console, then the managed by column will show configuration manager.
Okay. I'm going to ask you a question that our friend Jason Sandys, who's in the background, is very passionate about. When we talk about co-management, we're talking about managing on-premises and in the cloud. Do you have to be hybrid Azure AD joined in order to do co-management? Because there's a lot Microsoft doesn't do a great job describing this or explaining this. Are co-management and hybrid Azure AD joined codependent on each other? Is my question to you.
Go ahead, Steve.
And Steve, I see you're also passionate about it. So
so when we introduced co-management. We brought co-management to the forefront in late 2017, and the landscape was different in 2017. The majority of our customers that were using Config Manager were AD joined only, and so we looked for the shortest path first to get them federated into Azure AD in order to enable co-management. But that was meant primarily as a stopgap. Pretty much, especially if you're going greenfield. And I do have customers moving from, Ivanti and some, non-Microsoft management tools. And I get this question. I'm like, absolutely not. You do not have to be hybrid ADJ. I think a lot of customers saw some of our earlier guidance and assumed where we were walking people through setting up AD Connect prior to setting up co-management, and it was misconstrued as a prerequisite.
Danny, did you want to add on to that?
No, Steve nailed it. If we add any more on, it'll just get more confusing.
Yeah, I'm going to add one more thing on, is that I like to remind my customers that Azure ADJ and hybrid Azure AD joined is identity. Co-management is management, and they really are two different arms, right? They work well together, but they're not dependent on each other. You can, Danny, earlier we talked about autopilot into co-management, which actually requires a native Azure AD joined device.
Yep. Definitely. I don't know if anybody saw earlier, we released autopilot into co-management. That feature is Azure AD only. It is not hybrid. Angry bus of people, send them my way. I made that decision. It is the better way to go. I'll leave it at that.
Steve, I think I interrupted you a second ago.
Well, and if you notice, a lot of our innovation is pretty much geared toward Azure AD, even going as far as the innovations over the last couple of years in Config Manager, syncing collections into automatic Azure AD groups. All of that's designed to, allow you to, implement this fully as a cloud-based solution.
Yep, absolutely. And again, of course, you can do it as hybrid. It's just not a requirement. We have a question from Cloud, which is a great question. And Steve, even though we did introduce this back in 2017, late 2017, so about 4.5 years ago, a lot of our customers are starting to really implement this now. And Danny, you mentioned if you didn't do it during COVID, your VPNs were probably all tied up and you should have done it then, but let's say you didn't, right? How do we get started down this road? Cloud wants to know, let's say I didn't do it before, I have Configuration Manager. How do I get started down the road of tenant attach and co-management?
Yeah, so that's a good question, and I applaud the question because I wish more people asked that. In the sense that flexible work is not going to change. Like, there will be customers that go back to the office. There will be customers that will have a certain percentage of workforce that will just stay remote. Like, period. We've learned how to operate in the pandemic and not having to be at the office all the time, and more customers are learning that. So you kind of got to embrace it, whether your appetite for it be small in your organization or large. You can have some set, so you got to embrace this at some point. Getting started, I would say, God forbid, go back and read the old Big Three blog. It's still very much relevant. That kind of gives you I think of the Big Three as the three pillars, right? You get these three pillars to dip your toe into cloud. I would prefer that customers pick one, pick two, do all three, but do what makes sense for your business. And I like to starting with tenant attach first. Tenant attach is literally a no-brainer. Make that relationship from the cloud on-prem console to the cloud console. Again, no impact. If outside of you putting a username and password in there, and there's a Azure AD service that gets created just to help out with authentication and auditing. Outside of that, I mean, there's zero impact. If you never looked at the cloud console, you wouldn't even know anything happened. Your employees wouldn't know anything happened. But somebody that is looking at the cloud console, they would see something, and then they hopefully would start asking the right questions, right? Especially tenant attaching, getting you that value from endpoint analytics, those on-prem devices getting some value from endpoint analytics. Like, hands down, you should totally be, at least at a minimum, that should be your driving force. If you're not tenant attached today, and you have a subset of devices that are on-prem, if you're not at least tenant attaching for endpoint analytics, I don't know what you're doing. Like, you should definitely be doing it at least for that. And then that will open the door for more, especially if you have an appetite for I'll be honest. Like, if you're an admin today or an IT manager and you're not at least tenant attached for the analytics perspective, you're not going to find ways to make yourself or your team more efficient, more effective, like better use of your time. Hands down, if I was to go back being an IT director today, I would tenant attach literally for that reason alone. Analytics, and then analytics is just by looking at the analytics console, I'm gonna start to see other things, the other value that tenant attach is going to give me. That value that tenant attach is going to give me is going to drive me to then forward to go co-manage. And I sound like I'm drinking the Kool-Aid. I drink the Kool-Aid. I don't shower in it. But those are the very realistic things that make sense for you and your business. I get, everybody's value of what we have in Cloud Attach is different, right? Some of our stuff is high value, for some customers, and some of it is low value. But you should still be doing it for whatever amount of value it gives you that will give you the opportunity to be more efficient and effective, not just with your time, but your people, your resources. Everybody's resources are super tight, even ours, finite resources. So make sure you have the right information. Again, information is currency. Make sure you have the right information to go make the right decisions with those finite resources. I've said a lot. I probably broke myself into 10 different jails, but
I'm gonna
transparency.
I'm going to break both of you into jail. Steve, you said something earlier about how when you have that cloud management gateway that there might be a cost associated with it. And Danny, you're saying that with this tenant attached, there's no impact, nothing at all. So there's no cost associated, no Azure consumptions, no cost at all associated with that tenant attached, just the tenant attached piece to Intune, which is obviously a service of Azure.
Yeah, so no impact operationally.
Okay.
You will, if you want to do it correctly, right? If you want to do it correctly, you need at least one, and I mean one user that can log into that cloud console. So I don't know what it costs. I don't know. I'm going to make up a number.
One license. Yeah,
you need one license at least. So if you don't want to license it for everybody, fine. But that one person that wants to log in and look, they need the license. And most of the time, like most customers probably already have it. They just don't know. They got to go dig and talk to their account teams. And, I didn't even know we had this. Like, it might be worth the effort to go do it.
It will be worth the effort. So I was just going to, so a little bit ago, I saw a post pop up on the screen. We have some guided simulations. If you can go to aka.ms guided simulations, we have one for Cloud Attach. And I saw that pop up just a second ago. There it is, aka.ms/Cloud Attach. And this is really a good place to get started, where you can, this really is no impact to you because it's pictures and virtual simulation of how to enable Cloud Attach. And these are broken down into very digestible sections, 6 minutes, 4 minutes, 2 minutes, whatever that happens to be for this one. So take a look at that as well.
Hey, Joe, you brought up licensing.
Go ahead, Steve.
Joe, you brought up licensing. It's interesting because, right, for the better part of the last year, I've been working a lot with state and local governments. And obviously what's top of mind for them right now are all the threats out there, the threat landscape. And so many of them are adopting our security and compliance software and not realizing when we talk about how, the Microsoft 365 story is glued together with endpoint management, config manager, and Intune. And they're like, well, we just purchased E5 and I get to break the good news to them that they already own config manager. They already own Intune through automatically through inheritance. So it was an actual, the light bulb goes off in their head. Then you start showing them the possibilities of what they can do. And then we get into a discussion. Do I go 100% cloud and just skip config manager, or do I implement both? And of course, that's almost a topic for another discussion. In fact, Danny and I will have an upcoming show on that, as a matter of fact.
Yeah. I was like, wait, don't we have one of those?
Wait, do the two of you have a show?
Oh yeah, shameless plug. Unpacking endpoint. Oh, yeah, there it goes. That thing.
Right here.
And Danny, we have a very common question. I get this a lot. Is CNG required for co-management?
No, it is not. I get that quite often too. Oddly enough, I don't know why people think it is. I would love somebody to point me to the documentation that says that so I can fix it. But no, it is not required. So what I wanted to add on earlier to how the guy that asked, how do you get started? I told you 10 to attach because it's going to be the super lower bar of entry. You could do CMG. I think CMG for some customers is just a higher bar of entry. Related to co-management, though, it has nothing to do with co-management. Like it could have a relationship indirectly, but it doesn't have to have any relationship. If you want to turn on co-management, go turn on co-management right now, move some workloads in Pilot, move some workloads to Intune, and you'll see those things start coming from the cloud. If you want like this, think of a management point that you just want on the internet, then yeah, you go co-manage, right? Or our old school IBCM, still supported, but not recommended. Our recommended way is CMG, right? So it really just kind of depends on where you are. And again, I don't want to regurgitate the Big Three blog. Definitely, if you're asking that question, where do you get started? Read that Big Three and then come back to me, reach out with questions, concerns, thoughts, ideas. I really love working with customers and seeing the light bulb go off, right? No is powerful. I use no quite a bit. Every time people ask me for features and capabilities, like no, but like after you get past the no, especially with customers, like it is really satisfying, and I really feel like I've accomplished something. I think we all do when customers get out of their own way. Like when you get out of your own way and actually can see that this was made and built to help you. And look, it's not perfect in every way, but when you take what we've given you and see opportunities to be effective, efficient, use better your time and resources better, that for me, like when I see a customer do that at 12 o'clock, I can clock out for the rest of the day. Like I feel like I've accomplished something that I've actually helped and impacted somebody, not just work, but their life. Now they can work better. They can go home at 5 o'clock. And I'm lazy and selfish. Like I remember doing the exact same thing when I was a customer. I want to go home at 5 o'clock, not go home and pick up a call or go home and log back in. Like, man, I just want peace and quiet after 5, or I want to take time to enhance myself. And I couldn't because I was fighting fires. So again, drink the Kool-Aid, don't shower in it. Make sure you are doing the things that make sense for you and your business.
I have a question that came in from Olaf, but before I ask that question, something that you mentioned earlier, I wanted to ask you during that time and I forgot, but I don't want to forget now. You talked about how, you move the slider all the way to the right, or there's also the pilot group. I've seen some customers that start off with the pilot group and just keep adding machines into the pilot group and never actually move the slider all the way to the right. And they do this for a variety of reasons. Maybe they have 3 machines that they don't actually want to do it to, and we don't have an exclude button. That actually gets into Olaf's question. What do you think about that? Just keep adding into that pilot collection and never actually move the slider over.
So I don't mind that customers do that. That's separating, drinking the Kool-Aid from showering in it. For large customers, they always do exactly what you just said. They make pilot, they start putting stuff in pilot, and that slider will never move all the way right until they figure out, until the whole estate is there, right? And we didn't, to be honest, I wasn't in the conversations whenever this was created, but I don't think it was really thought about like that. I think that whenever we built it, we thought people would just use this to test the pilot and then eventually move. But that's not how customers used it. So there's not a problem with it, but I think it creates layers of complexity. And that's something you buy into, right? Again, you put it in pilot. So you bought into this level of complexity of having different device states and then different device states with workloads. And it can be very complex because guess what you can add to a collection? A sub collection. Right. So now you've got this pilot collection, more sub collections, and now when a help desk ticket comes in, instead of it being solved in 5 minutes, now it has to take 15 or 25 minutes to solve this because there's layers of complexity. I hate that customers do it. I understand why they do it. I probably am guilty of it myself, but it's a kind of a necessary evil, I would say. But eventually, we do want you to move the whole thing to the right, and it's just a scaling thing. The thing that I find that I won't say burns, but the thing that adds complexity is collection evaluator. So if you're move that thing to pilot, what happens is when a device is added to SCCM, depending on where your collection evaluator is and how complicated it can be, it could take time for said device to get in there. And we're looking for instant gratification, right? We put a device in the collection or we add it to SCCM. why is it getting policy? Why isn't it doing this, that, and the other? So, is a delay in that process of it getting to the collection, then is it in the right collection? Is that device a part of the collection of the collection of the collection? It gets kind of nuts, but like that's that level of complexity that can be there when you use that pilot collection.
And I think that goes into Olaf's question, which is why I brought that up now. Windows enrollment, I can assign a co-management authority profile to a group, but excluding a group is not available yet. And my specific purpose, we have some devices like a PAW machine or privileged access workstations where the config manager client should not be installed during provisioning. And so they're looking to exclude a group, which is sort of where I was going with the adding everything to pilot.
Yeah, we don't have an exclusion.
Sounds like a feature request.
Yeah, I will say we have talked about it. So it's not the first time we have heard it, and I'm sure my predecessors have heard about it. There's layers of complexity I think that you wouldn't want if that was something we were to do. But since I've been accountable for all of this cloud attached stuff lately, I don't vision things as like no. So I'm not saying no to the request. I'm saying it's just on the shelf until we find a way that makes sense to do it that won't create pain for you.
It brings up a good point where you can go to our feedback link. If Steve said it sounds like a feature request, and it is great feedback, Olaf. So thanks for posting it in there. You can go to aka.ms Intune feedback, and there it is on the screen again right here. Intune disappeared that fast. Intune feedback, and you can submit that feedback. You can thumbs up other feedback as well. We have a question from LinkedIn, and this has to do with our new cloud PCs, which are fully manageable through Intune. Can I enable co-management on a Windows 365 cloud PC? Steve?
Yes, Eric Orman and his team actually put together some guidance on this on Docs. You could probably easily find it by searching on Docs Windows 365 co-management. I tweeted about it a few weeks back as well. But yes, you can.
Great. And I like the Windows 365 PCs because those of you, this isn't the Windows 365 AMA. Christian has them all the time, so you can find his AMAs. But I do want to say that once you have a Windows 365 PC in Intune, it's managed exactly like any physical device is managed in Intune. You can do the same compliance policies, the same co-management, the same everything, with the exception of a couple of BitLocker policies that might be handled a little bit differently. Again, that's for Christian AMA, Windows 365, not so much for here. All right, so we have a question from Patrick. If you have devices that are hybrid Azure AD joined already, and you've enabled endpoint analytics inside of Intune with the configuration profile, is it necessary or a benefit to also select it in the tenant attach area of Configuration Manager? So if we've already allowing endpoint analytics in Intune, do we have to check that box in the co-management wizard?
If so no, because the device is already in Intune, okay, and you've deployed a policy to it to enable endpoint analytics. You're fine. The checkbox that's on the SCCM side is to get the analytics from the devices that are on-prem only, not managed by Intune. Okay. So when you check that box, endpoint analytics through the wizard, we'll get analytical information into the cloud for those devices, and now you can go off and do great things with analytics. And you should be. And analytics is the bomb. Analytics is the bomb.
If you missed that endpoint analytics AMA, that was hopefully we'll be able to get that up there. As well, it was at aka.ms/AMA/endpoint analytics. But I'm going to ask you this, Danny and Steve, because you work with a lot of state and local government, is co-management and is tenant attached, is this available in like sovereign clouds?
So,
did we lose Danny? Oh.
Endpoint analytics is things like endpoint analytics, tenant attach are all available in the GCC cloud, because in the world of Intune, we have pretty much we have commercial tenants, and then of course we have our special GCC high tenants. It gets interesting when you have customers, especially state and local government customers, who are also in GCC because basically they have an Intune tenant that was originally commercially tenant, but it's ring fenced with a Microsoft 365 GCC. So we run into some occasional intricacies. Like for right now, like remote health right now is not available in GCC, even though it is for commercial. But in the case of something like Endpoint Analytics is available in GCC, but not GCC High.
And I think Autopilot follows that same rule. And again,
exactly, yes.
Yeah. And I was just going to ask something else. I totally forgot where I was going. So I'm going to ask this question from Twitter, and hopefully my brain will catch up to what I was thinking about. Question from Twitter. I'm setting up co-management. When does automatic enrollment happen? When my user signs into their device or when it gets the policy from Configuration Manager? When does that automatic enrollment happen?
So if you went and used a radio button to say all devices, there's a policy. I mean, no matter what you select the radio button to, we send out a policy to the device to tell it basically when to enroll. So there is a delta. It should enroll if you've got a small amount of devices, they'll enroll very quick. If you've got large sets of devices, we kind of send bulk up a little bit at a time. What the exact time frames are, I wouldn't be able to tell you here, but if you got with me offline, there are some things you can do to figure that out. And actually, small plug for other features I'm working on. Again, if you're tenant attached, we will start to surface that information with some future updates that we got coming into the cloud console. So you'll be able to see all of that stuff and actually hit if the device is going to enroll, 2 days in the future, there'll be some capabilities where you can force it to do it now. So again, tenant attach and all that stuff, that black box will be unveiled.
Great. I'm thinking about what that question was that I was going to ask before. I was going to ask. We used to put up at our conferences, we used to put up big banners that say SCCM is not dead. And then we started putting up big banners that say Configuration Manager is not dead. And yet we still continually get, I know, Steve, you and I have talked about this, we get from our customers all the time, when do I have to go to Intune because I know Configuration Manager is on a path to deprecation? Can you please, and I don't want to say for once and for all, because we're going to continually drive this home. Can you verify the fact that Configuration Manager is not dead and we still continue to develop for it?
A lot of this comes from assumption. And, I can offer some guidance just to the generic Microsoft customer about assumptions. A lot of times assumptions can be drawn up in the press, but if anybody has looked at the Config Manager roadmap that's available, you start looking at the fact that we release Config Manager 3 times a year, and with each release, there is at least a page of features that are that come with each release of Config Manager 3 times a year. If you're seeing feature dumps every 4 months, it's safe to say that the product is not on the path to deprecation. When should you worry about the product being on the path to deprecation? When you stop seeing new features being developed. That's kind of, I would give that guidance to anybody out there using or consuming any Microsoft product. Of course, for Config Manager, again, I'll defer to Danny, who is the authority there.
I feel like I hate this question like once a week, if not sometimes once a day.
Only once a week?
Even
I get it more than once a week.
It depends on what's going on in the socials of the world. So Config Man is not dead. It's not on a deprecation path. I guess in one hand, if I squint hard enough, if I wasn't in Microsoft, yeah, I could see how you could connect those dots. But as Steve said, those dots are literally all your own assumptions. CM is not dead. CM is not going anywhere. If I was outside, I would look at CM and look at the cloud and see how do I simplify my CM with the cloud. Again, it's all about the dialogue when we talk to customers. Again, once you find the customer can get the customers out of their own way, I find that type of dialogue super exciting. Like the dialogue of trying to fight I won't say is not necessarily appealing. It can be fun to fight, but it's not necessarily appealing because we're not moving the needle forward on what your goals are. We're too busy defending instead of making forward progress. So whenever I hear customers ACID is dead, I was that guy that said I would never let my exchange go to the cloud, right? I remember my Microsoft guy saying, I told him straight to his face, I'm never gonna put my exchange in the cloud. Guess what? If I was to go back, it'd be the first thing I get rid of. Like, take that, I don't want it. I think as you go through that dialogue and start to move past or accept the fact, one, it's not dead, even if you think it's dead, how do I make my environment simpler? Like, seriously, if you've got primaries and CAS like today, like I don't know why. I don't know why you have that. It has to be something internal or politics or your structure, because I won't say I firmly believe, but I feel very strong that nobody really should have some insanely large environment, right? You should be on a path to simplify that environment. If you've got 400 distribution points, 900 distribution points, like, if you're not thinking about trying to make your life easier, then you're not trying to go home at 5 o'clock. You continuously just want to deal with SLAs and issues that come up. So move forward and keep an open mind. It's really exciting to see customers get out their own way, because when they do, the world opens up in a whole different way. The conversation, the dialogue, moving the needle is now something possible for them instead of all of the no and negativity. I mean, take the first step. Go turn on tenant attachment co-manage. Zero risk. Go do that stuff. Dip your feet in the pool and see what makes sense for your business. Obviously, we want you to consume it all, but for you, it may not make sense to consume it all. So what makes sense for you in your business? Delivery optimization. People could be using that and you don't even know it. Windows Update for Business. Again, you could be using that and you don't even know it. So there's value out there. You just got to kind of pay attention to it. And then once you pay attention to it, now Pandora's box is unlocked and we can actually have fun and talk about some good stuff rather than, hey, I wrote this script 8 years ago.
It's true. That's why people are afraid to leave Configuration Manager, because of a script from 8 years ago or a compliance setting that's very complex. I think some of this ties into a question we got from Saba here, and this might be more of a David and Arya question, so let me know if it is. We have co-managed devices. Our org uses about 50% work from home, and the others are work from the office. How do we control the workload of deploying patches and updates for the users working from home? As of right now, we have Config Manager handling the patches, which is something that Steve was talking about earlier. The machines are not connected via VPN to the domain. They are pure internet-connected machines. Is there a way that the users working from home can still get the updates?
Go ahead, Steve.
Well, this was a common thing that obviously we tackled at the onset of COVID a couple of years back. And what we found customers soon realized that their VPN concentrators couldn't handle the workload. So the next thing they wanted a list of all the IP addresses for our Windows Update service. And I'd explained to them that this is a multifaceted cloud distribution network that services 1 billion worldwide machines, and not just a couple of servers sitting in a building in Redmond. There's location affinity. There's just so much stuff going on. So the next phase was, well, I want to implement Cloud Attach. And I'm like, well, or I want to implement the Cloud Management Gateway. And I'm like, well, yes, you can do that, but you have to understand what cost you're doing. So for a lot of these customers, we had discussion around, basically their VPN philosophy. Why do a forced full tunnel? Let's do split tunneling, and let's just force your corporate traffic onto the onto the corporate network. Let's leverage a lot of other possibilities. We had customers who owned E5 that didn't realize that we had web filtering capabilities, so they didn't need to force everything back to the home office. They could just simply direct. Because it was much easier for them to create an allow list for their corporate IP addresses and then just let everything else go out to the internet, including Windows Update, and bring that stuff directly from us.
Yeah.
We typically this would end in about 5 minutes, but because this is the last of the 4 AMAs for today, we're actually going to go all the way to the hour. So I hope you all can continue joining us. We still have some great questions that I'm going to talk to Steve and Danny about. But so instead of wrapping up now, we're actually going to keep going. I hope that's okay with you, Steve and Danny, as well. I suppose I should have asked you before actually announcing that to the world.
I'm good.
We have a question here, and I apologize. I think it's Danny or Danea. I'm going to say Danea. Again, apologies if I pronounce that incorrectly. About auto enrollment and what has to happen for an auto enrollment device to go from unknown ownership to corporate ownership?
It's a good question. I think it's a device identifier. Like the device Steve, you can jump in if you're wrong. I'm kind of reaching, but I'm pretty sure it has to do with the device identifier or something that tags it as owned by the business. Because I know if I autopilot a device, the record's up in the record is in the autopilot profile. It'll be tagged as corporate. But if I just go image a VM and log in as corporate, it says personal until somehow either I flip it as an admin in the service or I do it on the device itself.
Steve, did you want to comment on that?
Again, I want to also reiterate that a lot of customers sometimes don't understand that for a device to be quote unquote automatically as a corporate device in autopilot, it has to be registered in autopilot because a lot of people confuse autopilot for what we call the commercial out of band experience through Azure AD, which is very close to autopilot, but is not actually officially autopilot. And we see periods when they're doing the commercial out of box experience where there is a lag temporarily, but then usually it gets all sorted out.
We have a question from Aaron. I think this got asked, Danny, while you were talking about connected cache, but although this isn't connected cache, but it's when you were talking about it, I saw it pop up. Is there a roadmap for an on-site cache server that is not using connected cache from a configuration manager DP? And that might be more of an Andy question, but do you know if we have any what the roadmap is for a cache server?
So I got a little confused towards the end of the question, but I think he's asking, is there
a standalone Microsoft connected cache server is the way I read that question.
So there is some private previews for that going on right now. Reach out to myself or Andy and we can get you connected into those private previews.
Great, thanks. And you can reach out to Danny. I don't know if we actually
tech community, Twitter, it doesn't matter. Just reach out, email, reach out. I can get you connected with the right people. There are some private previews going on where we're exploring that. We'll see how they go. So far, I've heard they've been going good. But that's all really I can share here on this forum.
Great, thanks. And we have another question from Saba that just came in. With Endpoint Manager, you cannot replicate the exact same settings from Configuration Manager. Endpoint Manager doesn't collect many information about device encryption when the workload moves to cloud management, cloud and co-management. So I don't have information about the encryption details without workarounds. What is your advice regarding the compromises needed to be considered when you're planning your configuration items in the cloud, but don't have some or detailed enough options?
Yeah, this is actually very real in what customers experience. Again, hopefully I'm not getting in trouble here, but yeah, you will go from one platform to another and you will see differences. I have always said both products are good. Both products are still alive, kicking and functioning very well. Again, I'll say it again, Configuration Manager is not dead. What you have to remember is both products, even though they may have the same capabilities, both products execute both capabilities vastly different. So if you look at the cloud in the sense of how, again, I've said it before, how do I be more efficient, effective? That may mean you will have to rethink some things, which again, let's be blunt. Rethink may mean you have to lose some control, some flexibility of what you were doing. And maybe we gave you other control and other flexibility in other ways. That doesn't mean that what Microsoft has is definitive. We're always open to change and learning from customers and evaluating what we need to go do versus what we should go do. There's lots of hard cuts and very, very hard decisions I can say that I've had to make, and I know others have to make as they go forward, looking at what we do in the next 6 months, 8 months, 10 months, 12 months. And that still has another higher lens that's above us to figure out how we go execute those things. So a little bit about how, peek behind the curtain there. But related to that configuration, right? If you need a specific configuration that drives the business, that makes decisions in your organization, that's how the business flows, then that's a hard thing that you may have to stick with your configuration manager for. There shouldn't be everything that like that.
Oh, Danny, you just muted. I don't know.
Somebody's trying to tell me. Somebody's trying to tell me to shut up.
I'd also point out that again, when you're talking about things that you could do in Config Manager, where you're looking at the entire estate, and certain things were asked of the IT pros from these emerging security operations centers. Like they'll go to the IT pros that are in charge of Config Manager, and they're like, I need a report on this, or I need this information relating to security. As we've been developing a lot of our cloud-based products, we understand now that for a lot of organizations, they have their management folks, but they also have many that have been standing up their own security operations centers. And so we want to tailor a lot of that stuff and put a lot of that information into the products that the security operations folks are actually looking at, so they don't have to constantly go back and forth to their counterparts and deal with turf wars and yada, yada, yada. And this is kind of what's shaping where things wind up and where things land in the Microsoft 365 product suite, which is, again, the importance of adopting Microsoft 365 and our stack, our E3 and our E5 stack, as a holistic solution. When you start picking things a la carte, you're like, well, I'm looking for this. Well, this was not in this product. This was in this product. That's why we push this Microsoft 365 story as an a la carte solution.
Yeah, you gotta really buy
as a holistic solution. I misspoke.
I was gonna say not a la carte.
Yeah, you really gotta buy into the holistic solution, right? So some of your configurations may be somewhere else. They may not be there, but you should definitely ask if you need them to drive the business. And then now look at, as Steve said, look at the other pieces, right? There may be other pieces in the ecosystem that you need that will help, and may even be better than what you think you were doing with that thing you think you can't move on prem.
Take the unmanaged estate. Take the shadow IT. We made a strategic decision that the folks that want to get in front of this the quickest are the security folks. So this was brought into the Defender for Endpoint and some of our advanced XDR components.
Yep.
When I look at Saba's question, and we have a couple more questions that came in, but when I look at that question, because it specifically calls out encryption as an example, I think about with MBAM, Microsoft BitLocker Administration Monitoring, kind of on its path to deprecation in April of 2026, and those features moved into Configuration Manager. Well, now I want to move those policies into Intune. So I had it being managed by one server, and now it's being managed by another one, and now it's going to be managed by the cloud. How do I know that was at 256 AES encryption versus, because if I set it in Intune differently, it's just going to fail. It's not going to re-encrypt, right? So I look at some of that.
You really got to compare those two and make sure, again, it's the whole testing thing, right? Make sure you're getting what you need. And I'm sure whoever Saab asked that question, he is doing some amount of testing, but definitely trust but verify, right? Make sure that the thing that you're expecting to be is there. And if it's not there, it's just a conversation between you and your security team to say, hey, these are the things that I can't see or won't be able to do. Do we have to have that? And those are key words. If that's a have to, then that's a requirement that may make you look other places inside the 365 ecosystem, or still stick with whatever you were doing before. But it's definitely, I call it a scorecard, right? Look at your scorecard and figure out where the wins, where the losses, and what are the things you have to do the business, and the things that you can rethink doing something else. And there you go. That's how you can start to make those decisions.
That's perfect. And is there a question from LinkedIn? Danny, you talked to a lot of customers. We all do. Have you compiled any kind of FAQs on Cloud Attach that maybe you published somewhere that we can point our customers to? Like, is there an FAQ for Cloud Attach?
No. There is no FAQ for Cloud Attach. There is, I do want to create one. One, just haven't had the time. Two, the questions customers ask about Cloud Attach, it's kind of hard to answer them in just blank generic statements. It really is dialogue that helps unlock the Pandora's box. Again, that's why I try to be on the socials. Sandy and a lot of other people in the background, we're all, I hope, at least I aim to be easily accessible. So ask your questions. Don't be afraid of asking a dumb question. I've asked plenty in my day. There's plenty of ways to reach out with me, get meetings one-on-one, others too. I don't have a FAQ. I wish I did, and I don't know. I question how much FAQ would actually even help too, depending on whatever.
It's a good point, because everyone's scenario is different. Every slider is different for different reasons.
Yeah.
I know we're at the wrap-up time, but I do have one question left from Gary, and I don't want to leave any questions on the table. So Gary asks, in your experience, and this is really to both of you, and we can actually do this as part of the wrap-up. In your experience, what is the primary cause for some devices in the pilot collection to remain as configuration management and not cut over to co-management? So I'd welcome you to answer that, and then just start giving some, like, your final thoughts. And so maybe we'll start with Danny. So what is like maybe a cause for a device to stay in the pilot collection and just remain config manager managed? It doesn't actually move over to co-management.
You'd have to have some hardware requirements, something that you're doing with that device. I have seen in retail customers that point of sale devices, right? Those will be the last ones to move over, right? Or something like that. It's some type of critical device. I have a retail background, industrial, and healthcare. So your critical devices would be the last ones. So just being honest, that'd be the last ones I would move over, or even maybe the first ones, depending on where I rank them in priority and prioritization.
I would also just go to the Intune console and check and see if you have any Windows enrollment failures on the first page, and find out there as well.
Yep.
Great. Any last words? Actually, before we go for your last words, please, everyone, thank you so much for joining us for the last 4 hours worth of content. We have a very quick 2-minute survey that we ask you to fill out. Just let us know that we hit the mark. We got the right categories, the right questions, the right topics, and that's on the screen, aka.ms/MEM. That's Microsoft Endpoint Manager, TCL, Tech Community Live Survey, so MEM TCL Survey. And again, I want to thank you all for joining us. Danny, any last words for our audience?
Nope. Go Cloud Attach.
A man of very few words, by the time where he probably should have a few more. Steve, any final words for everyone?
Stay tuned for our show next week. Next episode of Unpacking Endpoint Management, we're going to actually talk about government clouds.
There you go. And that's July 28th. Yep, a week from today. All right, so thank you all so much. Enjoy the rest of your day. And if I don't see you all, have a great weekend as well.
Yep. Thanks, everybody.
Arrivederci.